foreign policy. So that means China, that means Saudi Arabia, and I have a feeling, that means Israel. So both of these guys are actually my personal friends. We talk a lot. And I'm really glad to be doing this with them. I actually think I'm more Trumpian than either one of them on foreign policy. You got Jacob to this more interventionist wing of the thought spectrum, and you got Nick. He's a paleocon and wants to pull out of everything. So we're gonna run a clean debate. So Jacob, Wohl, and Nick Fuentes. Let's just bring them over.
Many of you know I'm a lot more interventionist when it comes to foreign policy because I think that there's nothing more America first than imposing our will on other countries. You look around the world and, people that are more on the non-interventionist side, they might say, oh, stay out of Greenland, don't buy Greenland. I say that Denmark is a baby country, as Nick would call it, and we should impose ourselves on the world and really push the idea that we're the best. We are the best country on earth, and we should show that.
And where can people find you online?
Instagram at Jacob A. Wohl is the best place to find me, jacobwohl.org.
And we got Nick the Knife Fuentes.
Yes. Hello. Is this loud enough here? That's what they say. Okay. Well, yeah, I'm Nicholas J. Fuentes, of course. I host America First. And that basically sums up my position on foreign policy. America First.
You took off 1 minute off your favorite topic.
Well, and here's the thing. If you watch my show, a lot of people don't really care for my foreign policy takes. I'll take heat from both sides. I'll take heat from these MAGA brain people who say, Iran is the #1 state sponsor of terrorism. We have to go in. And I'll hear from isolationists, and they say, Nick Fuentes is getting money from Israel. He's engaged in war with Iran. I can never please anybody. But here's the thing. I'm not ideologically opposed to intervention. I'm not ideologically in favor of any position other than that which puts American people and their interests first. And I think that anything under that umbrella is acceptable. And that is a good summary of my views. I have to also just interject. I know this is not exactly an optical outfit. I look like a cowboy over here. I was going to wear a suit. I brought a suit, but, we had some complications, so I just want to get that out there. Jacob Wohl's winning in the optics department. America First is the position.
The complicated business, as you said.
That's right.
Right? All right, so let's just jump right into it. Give Trump a grade from A to F, a letter grade on foreign policy, and why. And let's start with you, Jacob.
Well, when I look at Trump's foreign policy, if I'm as candid as I'd like to be, I'd say it's a mixed bag. And that's just grading him against his own promises. He said we'd pull out of Afghanistan. Well, here we are. It's not 2 months into his presidency, it's 3 years, and there are more, not fewer troops in Afghanistan, 14,000 the last time I checked. When you look at Iran, it's not clear what the position is on Iran. One day we'll say that we don't want regime change, and meanwhile, Bolton and Giuliani are running around in Albania, calling for Tehran to be crushed and the White House to be erected in the town square. So I would give the Trump administration overall, they've done a lot of good things. They've taken on China. They have just imposed crushing pain on the Chinese. That is wonderful. So there's been a lot of good things. We've worked with Latin America to stop third world peasants from crashing over our border. I think we can all love that. So overall, I give him a B. I give the Trump administration, I give Trump a B on foreign policy.
So you give the president a B, and what about you, Nick?
Yeah, well, it's a complicated picture because, of course, as Jacob indicated, I think thoughtfully, there are a lot of different areas of foreign policy. There are a lot of problems that he inherited coming into this administration. If you look at Europe, we had NATO countries that weren't paying their fair share. We had a situation with Russia, where I don't know if you paid attention, but a couple of months prior to the 2016 election, there was a very serious allegation that Russia was launching cyber attacks on the United States. And there was the big concern, I think it was in October 2016, that we were going to retaliate militarily against Russia. So you've got this situation. You've got the Middle East, of course, the Persian Gulf, the civil war in Syria, regime change pending in Iran, you have North Korea, you have, of course, the border crisis. And so I think taking a comprehensive look requires a comprehensive perspective. And what I mean by that is, has the Trump administration, paradigmatically, in terms of the paradigm, has he changed the way that we look at foreign policy? And I don't think that's true. While things have been getting marginally better in some areas, are we as hawkish with Russia as we would have been in the Clinton administration? Probably not, and that's an improvement. Are we marginally better on border security maybe than Barack Obama? Certainly a lot of the numbers don't reflect that, but some of the recent treaties this month and last month show that we're moving in the right direction. But I look at our posture against Iran. I look at our posture against North Korea. I look at our posture against Russia. And I say that in 2020, if a Democrat gets in office, or if in 2024 a Democrat gets in office, the foreign policy will revert back and it will be exactly the same. And so for me, I have to say that things are better, and they're better than the alternative, but things are not paradigmatically different. Are we really America first? Is it truly a nationalistic posture that is focused primarily inwardly towards our own people as opposed to outwardly towards people in Iran? We're fighting for freedom, or Israeli money, or things like this. I would say have to give them a C for that. I think it's just about average.
I did a video where I read children's books that are leftist children's books. Yeah, it's one of the most disgusting things you've ever seen in your life.
But right now I'm really confused because apparently I'm not a conservative. So what am I?
Has there been anyone in the administration that has surprised you from a report of what their position we thought may have been and what it actually is? Or, who's good and who's bad within this administration? Let's start with you, Nick.
Sure. So, of course, obviously the most high-profile mistake that Trump made in selecting personnel was probably John Bolton. And I understand why he did that. I think I explained this on America First when it happened, April 2018. The context of this was the North Korea negotiations. And I think that played a very critical role. You've seen my takes on this before. But that said, we knew from the beginning that John Bolton is a hawk that loves war and wants to bomb other countries. And that is diametrically opposed to America First. And so I think he's obviously the worst one in the whole administration. Now I'll say, he just left, obviously. His replacement is a little bit better. But I'll say that probably the best person, unfortunately, would be somebody like Mick Mulvaney. This is a conversation I have with a lot of people in Washington, D.C., that Mick Mulvaney is a Koch brother sellout. He's terrible on border security and everything. And so somebody like that, who's a libertarian on foreign policy issues, could have been a great national security advisor. He is opposed to intervention. Somebody like him would be cheering on engagement with North Korea, engagement with Iran, things like this. But instead, he's stuck at the chief of staff, where he's pulling in people that are opposed to the president on immigration. So the whole thing... All right, if we can relax over there. They've got a libtard in front of me. Low impulse control. We'll be on the panel. So, anyway, I know I'm rambling a little bit. So John Bolton worst, but he just left. Mick Mulvaney, surprisingly, I think he would have been good, but he's not in a foreign policy position.
Rex Tillerson, Pompeo.
Oh yeah, Tillerson was based. Tillerson obviously BNR. He came out against Israel recently. Yeah, he was all right. But he's gone now. So.
And Pompeo.
And Pompeo is, he's one of these people. He gave a speech recently, or I think it was actually prior to him getting tapped to be Secretary of State. He has these evangelical, apocalyptic beliefs about this confrontation between Israel and Iran. It's very disturbing stuff. It's a lot of these evangelical types. So, not anything wrong with evangelicals, but they do have these views about Zionism and the biblical interpretation of the showdown. So that's a little tough.
So Jacob, personnel as policy is an axiom that we've used in politics for the better part of probably 100 years in America. What do you think about some of the names that Nick threw out? Are there any that we're missing?
Well, I would first say Nick brings up this point that if a Democrat gets into office, maybe not next term, I think probably not next term, but maybe the term after that or whenever they come in, there's this issue of reversion. And we keep seeing this where everything in Washington just sort of reverts to the mean and gets back to the status quo. And so there is this issue of putting points on the board. Now, if you take a standoffish approach with Iran, you're not going to put any points on the board. You're going to get back into the Iran deal in a couple of years, whenever that happens. and you're going to be back to Obama foreign policy. So I think what Trump understands is you have to do hard things. You have to build a wall that's actually there. It's physical. You have to crush Iran in a material way. You can't just put pressure and maximum pressure, but next week something else is maximum pressure. And so when you look at the administration and the staffing, the worst person by far was Jim Mattis. And, you know, there was a lot of rhetoric when Mattis came in. Mad Dog Mattis, he's a real bulldog, he's real tough. Mattis is a supporter of the Iran deal. Mattis is cucked by Iran. What Mattis wanted to do was be in the administration for a couple of months, get a book deal, and go work at a think tank for $1 million a year in a no-show job. So Mattis was a complete disaster, and I hope that, you know, he never crosses into official Washington again. And when we look at the best picks, the most surprisingly positive picks, Bolton was seditious and he caused problems in terms of staffing. I think everyone understands that now in terms of setting things up. And real disaster. I mean, Bolton, you know, trying to set up the president, leaking, that stuff's not acceptable. He served his purpose and now he's gone. The best person overall would probably be Pompeo. I've got to tell you, Pompeo is the sort of prototypical spook du jour of Washington. He's CIA through and through, but he's carried out the president's agenda. He hasn't been seditious like Bolton. He hasn't sabotaged things. When the president tells Pompeo to do something, he does it. And so I'd say he was, on the positive side, one of my favorites.
Two names that went missed by both of you. Javanka.
Disaster.
Yeah, terrible. No good.
All right. So China. I want to get away from Trump for a second, and then I want to bring it back to Trump, so maybe I just got to couple it into two questions. How big of a threat is China to America? And is Trump handling that situation how you would prefer him to? We'll start with you.
So I wish he'd be more aggressive as it relates to trade. On the military side, you've got a big problem. Because at the rate that China is going versus the rate that we're going, China is set to be the biggest military on earth. They're going to be bigger than us if things continue the way they are. And we spend more money. The reason that is because we have private defense contractors and China has state-owned industry. Also, China doesn't waste time with studies on how to integrate transgenders into combat units. So they get rid of a lot of these sort of trivial side projects. On China, if Trump were to take his foot off of the gas and drop a brick on it instead, I think we'd be better off.
And can you note how well behaved the audience is? Round of applause for yourselves.
Round of applause for the unwashed masses. So, I hear everybody talking about China, and, my brief stint when I was in college for 1 year, I studied international relations, and we read a lot of John Mearsheimer. Okay, I was in college for 1 year. That's a big deal. But they always talked about China. China's the big threat. China's going to destroy us. We have to be worried about China. China does not keep me up at night. Multiracialism keeps me up at night. I think the greatest... Facts. Look, our problems clearly, the most existential threat to our country is internal. And I think that America can beat any enemy. We look at the greatness of America in all these wars, whatever, regardless of whether or not we agree with how we got into these wars or to what end they were directed, there's certain documentaries you can watch about what really happened. I don't know. Maybe it's a little long. Maybe it'll, stretch your patience. But the will of the American people, the greatness of our people is unmatched. And so I don't fear China. People fear Japan in the 1990s. What I fear is that we are weak at home. And so I will say, to redirect back towards the actual question, with China, the threat of China is very much overrated. Everybody talked about for a long time how China's going to overtake us, and China owns us, and China owns all our debt, and something like this. But you look at the structure of the Chinese economy, they have a 200% debt to GDP ratio. Nobody talks about that. When people talk about how their GDP is growing at 10, 15%, whatever, their GDP growth is down to like 6.3% this year, and they're revising it down every year. These numbers are already inflated. They fudge all their numbers, GDP, debt, everything. You know, when we look at our, or rather their national debt as a percentage of GDP, that doesn't even factor in shadow banking. It doesn't factor in the fact that, again, they're fudging all the numbers. So to me, the threat of China's economic might is overblown. The threat of their military is overblown. And also, I think that our interests are not even so much over in China. Let China have a reasonable sphere of influence. They got 1 billion people. To me, my concern is much more at home. I'm much more concerned about fertility rates. I'm much more concerned about marriages, drug abuse, things like this. We fix that, you don't have to worry about China.
So, Jacob, what is one country that Trump is going too easy on, and one that he should crack down on?
Well, if we're going to be honest about what country he's going too easy on, the obvious answer is Mexico. I mean, Mexico.
So obvious.
Mexico's problems have been our problems for the better part of the last century, and we continue to pretend that Mexico's our ally. Drug cartels, they're not coming from Greenwich, Connecticut. They're coming from Mexico City. And that is where really the problems, much of the problems that this country is facing are emanating from. And so I would take a much more aggressive stance on Mexico if I were Trump. I know that the Chamber of Commerce doesn't like it. I know that GM wants to ship all the factories and stop paying people $63 an hour and start paying them $8 and move them to Mexico. But man, just really a country that is going far too easy on. When you talk about a country that Trump is going too hard on, geez, it's a tough question, because for so long America's just been really, quite submissive to the rest of the world, to the rest of the world's interests. So a country that we're going too easy on, wow, that's a tough question. I'd go a lot harder. Right. No, exactly. If I were Trump, I'd make a concerted effort.
Jacob, let's be honest. Your Instagram says that if Trump declares war with Iran, you're enlisting. Wouldn't you crack down on Iran?
No, I mean, but we're going hard on Iran. Okay. We're talking about who he's going easy on, who he's being accommodated to. He's being accommodated to Mexico. There's no question. He's not being accommodated to Iran. I don't think anybody would argue that. He's going. I would, if I were Trump, I'd make a concerted effort through the media to just tell him to leave Saudi Arabia alone. Really, I think that this, Khashoggi, who cares? I don't care about Khashoggi. He's a Saudi citizen, and we keep having to hear about how we can't trust the Saudis, how the Saudis are the bad guys, and certainly the Saudis are rough characters. But there are rough characters in that part of the world, and I think we should continue to use them as a tool to exercise our will in the Middle East.
So, Nick, it might actually, in hearing it now out loud, it might be the same country, but it might not. So who is Trump going too easy on, and who does he need to crack down on?
So
behave yourself.
Yeah, I think maybe people have a sneaking suspicion of that. Maybe I'm going to play into that for a fact. Maybe it's not even totally correct. Well, here's what I'll say about Mexico. In June, the president threatened to put 5% or a 10% tariff on all goods coming from Mexico to the United States. Now, it never went into place, but they were able to write up an agreement, and the Mexican foreign minister came to the United States, I think in September, and said that illegal crossings were down 56%, and said that if you looked at the apprehensions at the border, that was down 20%. It was 120,000 in the month of May, it was 100,000 in June, it was 70-some thousand in July. I don't know the exact figures, but it's been going down. Now, what's the country that Donald Trump has not been going hard on at all? What's the country that Donald Trump, if anything, has been bending over backwards to please and to satisfy? A country that, by the way, is not exactly helping us. I think we all know the answer. I think we all know which country is driving our foreign policy in the wrong direction. And I have to say that country is Israel. I'm going to tell you why. But I'm going to tell you why. Here's why. You look at what Israel's been doing. It's not just the foreign aid. You look at what happened just last week, and there was a spy caught red-handed putting these cellular devices near the White House and in the Capitol. that intelligence officials attributed to the Israeli government. Now, did Trump go on Twitter and say, very disrespectful, we give everything to these people, and this is how they treat us? Was there a private admonition, or did it come out that he quietly swept it under the rug and said, oh, it wasn't them, I'm sure it wasn't them, it's okay. You know, I remember one of the first press conferences that Trump did after he got inaugurated was with the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. And Trump said at the conference, hey, if you could take it easy on the settlements, that would be great. Because it's been the official position of the United States government since the 1967 war that we oppose civilian settlements. Me and Jacob debated about this a long time ago. But that's the official United States position. And so Trump said, look, if you could really take it easy, because when the Israelis are annexing parts of Palestine, or they're occupying with civilian settlements, or things like that, that makes it a lot harder for us to do diplomacy with countries like Iran and with other countries in the Middle East. It's very difficult. We just had the 18th anniversary of 9/11 recently. What was the number one grievance of Osama bin Laden in his fatwa against the United States in 1999? It was his support for the state, or rather the United States' support, unconditional, for Israel. And so things like that make it very hard for us to conduct our foreign policy. How did Netanyahu respond to President Trump's reasonable request? Take it easy on the settlements. He approved one of the largest expansions of the civilian settlements in Israeli history. A slap in the face. We've done nothing but nice things. We moved the embassy. We labeled the IRGC a terrorist group. That was unheard of. Maximum pressure campaign. We recognized their annexation of the Golan Heights. The list goes on and on of areas where we've met Israel in the middle, and they've done nothing. And so to me, it's like we've gone after Mexico. We've threatened Central America. We have done nothing to go after the problem that we all know about, but nobody talks about in Washington, D.C. So I would say that it's
just one moment. Where's the problem? Because we talk about these things. But where does it come back and hurt us? It makes it tougher to do diplomacy with Iran. They don't seem very receptive anyhow. I'm missing where you talk about the spy ring, if you will. I have to take issue with some of the facts there. What they did is they didn't catch a spy red-handed planting a listening device or something like that. They found some devices around the White House. These Stingray devices are all over Washington. And the intel community, those people we can trust, those great patriots in the intel community said, we believe it's Israel. And then 2 years later told a reporter at a very trustworthy publication that we all know is Politico. So I take issue with the facts there. I would really, if true, disturbing, but I really have a hard time believing that Israel has to use listening devices. I think they have better things than, taking apart a sprinkler and selling some weird device.
Nick, they made Waze. Waze, the app, right, yeah. Well, that's a great question. That's a great and a fair question. Why is it such a problem that Israel, this is a question I'm asked all the time, why do you care so much? It's just a little, country the size of New Jersey. What do you got a problem? We're just trying to do our thing. We just want our own country. The Arabs have all these countries. We just want one little country. They don't tell you how big they want it to be, though. They don't want to tell you it's from here to there. And it's like, it's not going to be the size of New Jersey in 50 years. I don't think that's the plan. Third temple is going up. From here to there. Maybe. I don't know. But in any case, on a more serious note, I'll give you a perfect example of this. Do we look at the situation in Syria? I happen to be a strong supporter of Bashar al-Assad. But in the case of the Syrian civil war, it is the America First position, in my opinion, that we seek stability in the region above all else. We want to stabilize the region, reassert American hegemony, through soft or smart power. I don't care for these terms, but it's economics, it's sanctions, it's things like this. And we are trying to stabilize Syria. We want a strong, centralized government that's cooperative with the United States. Now, prior to the Arab Spring, prior to Barack Obama giving material support to the so-called moderate opposition in Syria, Bashar al-Assad was completely cooperative with the United States. They tortured our terrorists, because we couldn't do it because our gay humanitarian laws. We sent them over there, and they tortured them. And, they took down their nuclear weapons program after 2003. And so they were cooperative. Now, Israel, instead of assisting us in this, they've done the opposite. They do these airstrikes, and we've pleaded with them. Stop with the airstrikes. We're trying to strike a deal. They're trying to stabilize the country. And they keep doing airstrikes in Damascus, all over the place. They're hitting the Syrian government. Beyond that, you've heard, there's multiple quotes from the Israeli defense minister, from the top Israeli intelligence chief, that they would prefer ISIS on their borders as opposed to Bashar al-Assad, as opposed to Syria. That's not America's position. I don't think we would prefer ISIS as opposed to, well, maybe we wouldn't. Our government might, based on who they get funded by. And so to me, that's one crystal clear, perfect example of how our material support for Israel is undermining our interests. And we have to talk about that and crack down on it.
Let me just get into one thing, and it actually sets up perfectly for this point. And let me ask you: you support Assad, and you want a strong central government. Would you want Assad to have nuclear weapons? Is that
No, of course not.
okay? So in 2006, Assad was building nuclear weapons. He was building a nuclear reactor with the help of North Korea. This is well documented. Now, speaking of North Korea, Israel is kind of like our North Korea in the region. Sometimes they're a bit of a Tasmanian devil, but they tend to do our bidding on the whole. And so when Syria was building a nuclear reactor with the help of North Korea, Israel went right in and bombed the hell out of the thing and finished it off. There was no more nuclear reactor. There was no environmental disaster. It was finished off. And that's just one example of Israel sort of doing our bidding. And now I'm going to be an honest Zionist here, which is rare. You know, there are these Zionists who say there are these Zionists who say we just want to have a small little state, just our own little state. You know, it's basically it's basically just like New Jersey, like you said. That's not true. Of course, Israel projects their power throughout the world. Nobody, I mean, come on. Is anybody going to question that? But if you look around the world, how Israel's projecting their power, I think it basically comports with everybody's ideas here in the room. In Hungary, they supported Orban. In Italy, they support far-right parties. In Brazil, they supported Bolsonaro. In Ukraine, they supported Zelensky. Over and over and over again, we're seeing that Israel's support of political movements, their support of sort of extra political movements, judicial movements around the world, tends to be what we would think of as nationalist, kind of isolationist even. It's not like, what many people say, they're just trying to start wars all over the place. Orban's not a guy who's looking to start a war. I don't think Bolsonaro's a guy who's looking to start a war. So when you look at Israeli power projection, it tends to comport with what I think most people, at least in this room, would agree with.
Yeah, so to answer a couple of parts here, I would say about the Syrian nuclear plants, I was tempted to interrupt, but, I'm trying to be respectful that, they went into Syria and they blew up all those nuclear reactors. Sounds kind of familiar, Just like when we went into Iraq, we blew up all the nuclear reactors.
Well, they did it in Iraq, too, in the 80s.
Yeah, I know that, but I'm just saying that, if you deny the intelligence of, we have these cell phone devices in Washington, and we don't know they're from Israel, I don't know if we're going to really take Israel's word for it that they were going and destroying nuclear infrastructure. In any case, the facts are irrelevant. It's not 2006 anymore. And Assad is not trying to build a nuclear reactor. He's trying to stabilize his country and protect Christians. And to me, that's in America's interest. And so I think that example is just sort of negated because of, maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you might have had a point, but in 2019, it's obviously a very different dynamic in the Middle East. On the second point about Israel sponsoring all these different nationalist groups, I mean, you're right. You can see Bolsonaro, Salvini, Orban, all these leaders somewhat regrettably going over, and they're going to take their trip and go to the Western Wall, and I'm sure you love that, and that's great.
Absolutely.
And I'll say that there's some truth in that. I've talked about this on my show. I think it's relatively benign when a Bolsonaro goes and does it. Salvini. It's not something I'm in love with, but it's not something that's the end of the world. Now, the United States is a different story, because Italy does not project power on a global scale. Brazil does not project power on a global scale. Neither of these countries have hegemony in the Middle East. America does. And so maybe Bolsonaro's cost, his cost of admission for gaining the support of the Zionists is relatively small or doable. But for America, we can see that cost borne out time and again. We can see very clearly the prioritization of the Israel agenda over the American agenda. And so, look, I would maybe even be more congenial to this if other things were being accomplished. But that's not happening.
Well, it is in America, too. It's not just in these places. I mean, if I were Israel, and I just really were dying to have some wars right in my backyard in the Middle East, I can't imagine why I would, but if I were Israel and that's what I wanted, I think I might get on the phone with Sheldon Adelson, if I were Bibi Netanyahu, and I'd say, you know what, Sheldon, please throw your weight and your money behind Hillary Clinton. We need some wars. She's a war hawk. Please support Hillary Clinton. I certainly wouldn't approve of Sheldon Adelson supporting Trump. And what you're seeing over and over again is that really Israel was pro-Trump. They continue to be pro-Trump. I think that the sort of support that Trump has given to Bibi will be reciprocal in the 2020 election. So I'm not seeing it here. I'm not seeing the sort of Israeli effort to undermine right-wing politics.
Let me jump in here. So Saudi Arabia, do you think that Trump has gotten too close with the Saudis, or how do you think he's handling that?
Is that me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I think, look, it's sort of this tag team in the Middle East. We're getting tag teamed by Saudis and the Arab countries, the Gulf countries, and Israel together. Increasingly Saudi Arabia is getting in bed with Israel, regrettably. So I'll say that. But aside from this, to address your point about Clinton, I will say a rare defense of Barack Obama. Do not consider Barack Obama a legitimate president. But he did stand up to Israel. Right before he left office, I don't know if you remember this, but there was a UN Security Council resolution condemning Israel. Instead of vetoing it, like we were obligated to do slavishly, veto any resolution that opposes Israel, the President of the United States says, we're going to abstain from the vote. We're going to allow it to go through. There are many documented cases where the Obama administration, under which Hillary Clinton served as Secretary of State, stood up to the Israeli lobby. The Iranian nuclear deal, which you opposed, which the hardcore Zionists, Likud party opposed, that took place under the Obama administration. So I don't know if it's exactly true that Hillary Clinton would be starting a war with Iran necessarily. I think, if anything, maybe they placed their bet that Trump would be the one who would help the Zionist interest. And so far, they basically have. Now, has it meant full-scale ground war by the United States in Iran? Of course not. But Trump has dutifully recognized the annexation of the Golan Heights. Trump has dutifully moved the embassy to Jerusalem, recognized officially Jerusalem as the eternal capital of Israel. Trump, under this Congress, greenlit the $3.8 billion per year. It was actually passed in 2016, but he reaffirmed it in the Congress. We've seen these insane anti-Semitism laws where it's like, if you're not signing a loyalty pledge to Israel, you can't get a government contract. The list just goes on and on and on. And like I said, I understand. I'm a pragmatist. I believe in politics, choices, things like this. Maybe it would be worth it to get money from Sheldon Adelson, do these concessions, and in exchange we'd be getting a hardcore, full-throated nationalistic president. I mean, we just haven't seen our end of the bargain upheld. It seems like Netanyahu is respected, Israel is respected, they get their share, and the voters aren't really seeing it.
And so the question of Saudi Arabia, you're allowed to say what you want.
I would only respond to kind of one thing there, and that was just the point of Obama and why Obama was sort of so anti-Israel. I think we kind of know where Obama's motivations were on that issue. The Middle East kind of falls along very basic lines of Jew and Muslim. And we know where Obama was coming from on that issue, and on which side of the fence he was on.
Maybe he's right about Israel.
I don't think so. I don't think they are. But on the question of Saudi Arabia, it's a tough thing. In Saudi Arabia, you have a situation where the king is geriatric, demented, some say, and you have the son coming in, and the son certainly wields a lot of influence. Now, is Trump too close or not too close? I think he's not influential enough, is the way I would put it. Because when you have an issue of Saudi facilities getting bombed by Iran, allegedly, we sell Saudi Arabia a whole lot of weapons, $110 billion worth in the last couple of years. Why isn't Saudi Arabia using their military? I mean, why is this always, we have to call up our uncle in America and have America handle everything? So, whatever Trump's ties are to Saudi Arabia, it's really hard to get a grasp on, because it seems that it's kind of hugs and kisses and everybody goes along and gets along, but when the time comes for action, Trump doesn't seem to be able to get what we need out of Saudi Arabia.
We find this weird relationship with our closest ally where they bomb our ships and they get us involved in all these things that we don't directly in the moment have any interest in, but we become interested in. When are we ever going to be able to stop going to war? When are we just going to be able to...
Never. War is a natural state of being as a human. It's always been here. It's always going to be here. And you mentioned, I just have to correct you, because I just can't allow the kind of fallacy. The United States government report that was done by the waspiest people you've ever met said that the USS Liberty incident was an accident. Nonetheless, I have to say it. The U.S. government's own report, and Israel's report, but the U.S. government's own report. Even so, Israel paid not one, not two, but 3 settlements to the United States over the USS Liberty. So I think, you can make fair points about Israel's influence, but the USS Liberty is just, it's debunked, it's off the table, it's
Who are some people that you miss who have been deplatformed, and talk a little bit about this issue of free speech and how they're coming after us, and it's more than us.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's some obvious. Here's the thing, I mean, look, everybody cries about the big e-celebrities, and I have to tell you, I get the sort of anti-e-celeb resentment, all right, I understand it. And so people will weep for a big verified account, people will weep for a huge account, but to me, it's sort of like the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, it's like that small account with 5,000 followers, something like that gets banned, nobody knows about it, people forget over time, like teardrops in the rain, the greatest anon accounts, they just go away. So I would have to say, I really have to hand it to these smaller accounts, but maybe the bigger ones, I'd probably say like Sam Hyde, he's obviously back on there now, but Night of Fire was one of the best ever, we all know that. I would say that he's going to be missed. Honestly, this might be not very optical, but frankly, Andrew Anglin. Hate to say it. Look, and for no other reason other than that he was first. Everybody wants to complain now. Everybody and their brothers getting banned and demonetized and everything. And now everybody wants to make a big stink. Now everybody wants to protest and sue and everything. But for what it's worth, nobody had much of a beef when Andrew Anglin got banned because he was a Nazi. And nobody cared when all the Charlottesville people got banned and deplatformed and ostracized and everything because they were Nazis. They were white nationalists. Now, all of a sudden, the Overton window has shifted, or I don't know, I guess the censorship has creeped up. It's getting uncomfortable for a lot of these, Shapiro types and Shapiro-funded types. And now they want to make this everybody's crusade. Now I got to be fist fighting in the streets with Antifa so Ben Shapiro can, sell advertisements or something. It's not fair. It's not fair. You got banned first. So I would say it's people like that.
Well, everyone misses Milo, and we miss Alex Jones, and we miss a lot of these people. Certainly, Gavin McInnes, of course, we miss on Twitter. But we're dealing with a sort of a unique problem that I think could use some precision. Twitter censorship and YouTube censorship are two very different things. Twitter is a small company that has outsized influence because it's sort of the thought platform, it's the news platform, and it is the platform. There is nothing else. There's nothing else like Twitter. And when Twitter bans somebody, they ban them because they felt like it. And how do we know this? Because they tell us. We've seen Jack Dorsey go on to the Joe Rogan podcast and tell us exactly why, and it's very political, and nobody would ever doubt that that's the case. Now, when we look at YouTube, that's all about advertisers. YouTube has to be ad safe. YouTube's ad revenue for one quarter makes Twitter's annual earnings look like a drop in the bucket. And so YouTube is all about the advertiser. The advertiser is king, and if your content on YouTube is not ad safe, then they're going to get rid of you. What is ad safe? Ad safe is makeup videos, it's clickbait vloggers that are prancing around LA, dressed in God knows what. This is ad safe content. They don't want Trump, they don't want conservative, that's not ad safe. Clorox has got to be able to write the check and know that they're going to be advertised on something that's very straightforward. The other thing I would say on the issue is that I think this issue of saying conservatives are being censored, conservatives are being censored, conservatives are being censored. I think it's a problem. I think we need to start saying Republicans are being censored. And a lot of people say, oh, I'm not a Republican, whatever. The reality is we live in a two-party state. And if you want the support of the big boys, the Republican Party, I think that we need to make this an issue of Republicans being banned. Make them feel like the cucks, like they're the people that are being banned, even though largely the establishment is not. And I think that's how you're going to build the support, because there is no conservative party in this country. There's a Republican Party.
There's something that you like about the guy sitting next to you.
Oh man, there's so much. I've debated Nick so many times, and we always have a good time. And he's lively and well spoken and articulate, and clean. Clean, articulate. You don't see that very often.
Advertiser friendly.
He's a clean, articulate Afro-Latino commentator.
Campus conservative.
Thank you very much. I agree. I think it's a very civil debate. I like debating with Jacob Wohl because, really my problem is the deception. It's the dishonesty. And this is contrasted with Jacob Wohl because he's right up and honest and tells you what he is, and he is what he is, and that's great. Because our big problem, I think, is not each other. It's not that we have disagreements. It's this gatekeeping mentality. We are essentially all in this together. Obviously we have significant disagreements, but on a lot of the fundamentals, I think we are together. There's more to be gained by fighting together than separately. People like me in particular, people that are a little bit more woke, maybe higher power levels. We rely on a big tent movement where everybody's protected. And by the way, everybody benefits from this because, like I said about Andrew Anglin, he's terrible, whatever. But people like me are first to go, right? Or maybe second or third or fourth to go. But ultimately then it's people like Jacob. And you get all the way up until the only acceptable dissent in opposition is John McCain and Mitt Romney. And so everybody stands to gain. Everybody stands to gain from a big tent movement where everybody's got each other's back. And so when they try and say white nationalist, neo-Nazi, nobody says, oh, well, it's them, we'll cleave them off. Because then they'll find themselves on the edge too eventually. Exactly. We are all in this together. So to me, I have to, and I know I don't want to grandstand, but I really do just want to commend Jacob because he's honest. He was willing to share the stage on my show even when it wasn't even that big, when nobody else was. And, he came into a hostile crowd that obviously, I say Israel, and people, we have a problem with that. But he's straightforward, he's tough, and he's smart, and he gets it. He trolls even my audience sometimes, so I respect him a lot.
Yeah.
Fight silently and hate each other silently, but if we disagree publicly, well then, we're not allowed to do that. Last question, before I can find Will Witz asked. Talk Trump 2020. Do you guys think that he's going to get reelected? If you were talking to the campaign, what are some issues that he needs to highlight, facing 2020? Obviously be pragmatic.
Sure. I have to tell you that, we had our Yang Gang collective phase where, for a time, we put on the pink hat and we were going to, secure the bag and all that. Turned out not to work out. He's cringe. The guy's I don't know why we ever bought into that, honestly. I mean, the guy literally, browses Reddit. And he's saying, we should eat bugs and stop eating meat. And everyone's like, what? I thought you were based in Redfield, So, admittedly, 6 months ago, I was not enthusiastic about voting for Trump. I have to say that in the last 3 weeks, if you've been watching my show, good things have been happening. Immigration's been turning around a little bit. Foreign policy has been restrained. And so I have to say that, even looking at the Democratic opposition, which is not good, Joe Biden's obviously crashing and burning. Elizabeth Warren is ascending. Trump is raised $5 million in the 24 hours after they announced the impeachment inquiry last week. And so to me, it just looks like this is an unstoppable machine. People forget, Trump may not be the best at governing the country and being the president, but he's the greatest campaigner in history. And I know, the substance matters more, but in terms of winning elections, that matters. So I think he's got a really great chance. My money's on him, absolutely.
Yeah. Tulsi Gabbard.
Trump 2020.
Yeah, I think that I tend to agree that we're in very good shape. I was a bit worried about Biden before learning of his dementia and everything else. Warren is come on. I mean, that's ridiculous. Warren can host a yoga class perhaps, but not run the country. So I'm feeling very good. But what makes me more optimistic? You talk about campaigning. One of the greatest things about the 2016 campaign is that we can get together. People can wear a shirt that says America First. Say no longer afraid like they used to be to wear a shirt that says America First, to say that they believe in making America great again, to say build the wall. And I say, wow, that campaign, however long it was, 2.5 years or something, that really did a lot for us. Imagine one more. I mean, just one more run. Trump making 6 stops a day on the plane and just saying, screw China, screw Mexico, it's America first. I mean, it's going to be wonderful. And the liberals will be angrier than ever, but what can you do?
Round of applause for these two.